Thank you.
Oh,
Y'all should figure out what to do with that.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the final Peace Camp live stream slash podcast. This is our final day, and sorry we're a little bit late to get started. But we're going to start off, as always, with introductions. If we can go around and say our first name, our pronouns, and school or organization, and then we'll try to kind of let you all, as opposed to the other times, lead the discussion and talk about. I'll just remind you of some of the things that have happened between yesterday and today. But we had a chance to speak with Shiloh, who is a veteran, and talked about the role that the military really serves in the U.S. military really serves in the world, and how that's all kind of connected to the same thing. And then of course we had our make your own pizza, and today Matios is here on the podcast, and Matios will be talking about Stop LAPD spying and the role that the police serve in the very same system. So yeah, let's just go around with introductions first.
Hey, thanks. I'm Matios. I use he, him pronouns at Stop LAPD Spying.
Hi, I'm Jackie, and I'm from Tracy.
I'm Benjamin. I'm from Fairfax High School, and I use he, him pronouns.
Hi, my name is Jabbar. I'm he, him. I'm also a mentor at Jefferson High School.
And hi, everyone. My name is Eric, and I use he, him pronouns, and I'm helping with the podcast. So with that, why don't we start with Matios, actually, to talk a little bit about the talk that you just gave.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks so much. It's so good to be here. I was really thrilled to talk about Stop LAPD Spying. And for folks who don't know, we're an abolitionist organization based in Skid Row, working to dismantle police surveillance, but ultimately to abolish policing. And we talked about organizing strategy, right? How we determine our strategy, how we identify targets, and how we identify what we want to prioritize in our organizing agenda. So we talked a little bit about how we did that at the coalition, but ultimately we talked about what that might be for students here today in conversation. And so we talked about how a lot of our priorities when determining our organizing agenda is what's important to our communities. What are our communities feeling? And then we talked about what are some of the ways we learn more about the things attacking the people, the entities attacking our communities, and how to best make change.
Awesome. Thanks, Matios. Can I hand it to you all to maybe ask Matios any questions that you might have that you didn't have an opportunity to ask, or thoughts that you had, or wherever you want to go with this conversation?
How long has your organization been around, and what led you to create it?
Yeah, so the organization has been around for 12 years, and it was made in response to increases in surveillance, kind of post 9/11, and how I think, our founders kind of realized that there were a lot of conversations around surveillance that were going on that talked about, right to privacy and all that, but no one was really talking about the fact that all these surveillance sophistications were often being experimented on and then ultimately implemented on Black communities, specifically the Skid Row community. And so, our location within Skid Row is no coincidence. It's very much rooted in why we kind of came up. I think I answered the question.
Hi, Jabbar. Yeah, I was interested in knowing in terms of like we were talking about earlier about what is some of you guys' new approach in terms of being more innovative and strategizing and being more, calculating, going against such an imposing force. We have to be more innovative and, think about different directions of organizing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the things we kind of have to reckon with is anytime, we achieve a victory or even a benchmark or even get close to victory, they're going to adjust. to make things a little bit harder. So I'm reminded about, I think I talked a little bit about that website we launched, watchthewatchers.net, which the components of which were attained through the Public Records Request Act in California, which is a law that lets you get California public records. And that's how we get all our information for our research, that along with community input. And so this morning, the city attorney actually, there was an article about the city attorney lobbying to weaken the California Public Records Act. And that's directly in response to the fact that we created this website, right? They sued us too. And so I think it's just staying nimble, right? Strategy and avenue are always going to change because political repression is going to ramp up every time we win. They're going to try to make things harder. I think the one thing that stays consistent is our ties to community and our drawing power through community. And the one game they kind of can't ruin that we have is ruining this type of veneer of legitimacy, shining a light on their lies. That's always going to be the playbook, right? So I think just relying on that even as things change. Because ultimately, Pete White, our executive director at LA Can, he says we're truth tellers. Like that's our job. And my favorite definition of organizing has been asserting reality, our reality, in the face of lies. And so that's just all we do consistently, regardless of the strategy.
Hi, I'm Charlie. Is Hamid Khan still affiliated with you guys? Yeah, and is he on the radio?
Radio Insurrection, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, just checking. Yeah, he came to one of our camps in the other location before coming. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Hamid says hello.
I was wondering, I know earlier we talked about how the ultimate goal would be to disband the LAPD possibly. So what would you say to people who might believe that dismantling the LAPD or cutting funding to them would increase crime?
That's a great question and something that comes up a lot. The LAPD has been pretty successful at branding themselves as safety, right? Oftentimes when we think of police, we think they're inextricable from safety. But, one of the things I often think about is like, if something does go down, right, the LAPD or any other police department, they're going to show up after, right? After it's done. It doesn't necessarily prevent it. The other thing I often like to think about is, this is the biggest budget the LAPD has ever had, $3.2 billion, right? And so we've increased policing over a century and a half to the biggest and most sophisticated, most weaponized it's ever been. And yet there's still crime, which probably tells us that this isn't the solution, right? And so we know that, most crime is rooted in poverty, right? And so we know that there are solutions that we can try to implement. We've just never really had the opportunity to, and that's because these agencies have such a chokehold on our resources. So yeah, that's kind of when people do bring up, danger and a response to policing. I do bring up that, policing exists and those dangers still exist, and community violence is real. We need to reaffirm that. I don't think we can pretend like violence doesn't exist or like harmful things don't exist outside of policing. They do. Obviously they do. Within our daily lives, conflict exists, trauma exists, usually as a result of these conditions we're in. But I think what we need to be honest about ourselves with anytime someone brings up policing as the only solution to that is, has it ever worked? And lastly, I think people don't realize how new these institutions like policing are. Like, 160 years is not a long time. And so I think we just need to recognize that they've successfully established themselves as the norm, as something that's always existed, as something that's timeless in TV and movies and all that. But in reality, they're very new and very rooted in their original agenda, which was to catch enslaved people.
Sorry. How do you feel about like? I think it's a good idea, but like you said, like how would like, you know, other people like be able to like help out the community? Well, not like in that way, but like what if something's going on and like no one else is there and there's only like the cops? But I do agree that there are like, I don't know, I feel like they overgo their like their place in like whatever they're doing, like the police. Like I don't think they should be putting hands like on people like that or like mistreating them like that, because I feel like there's no need to do all that. Like I don't know, but I do understand where you're coming from. Sorry, I didn't know what else to say.
I think you raise a good point. Right now, because of the way things are slated, if something bad does happen, there's no one you can call but the police, right? And so I think what we're envisioning is a future where there is someone else you can call that's not police, right? Because in addition to putting hands on people like they occasionally do, or shooting people for no reason like they occasionally do, one thing the LAPD successfully does is target poor black and brown communities to incarcerate them. They're really good at getting people in prison, right? That's their job. And oftentimes it's for a ticket, we can't afford to pay because, we don't have good jobs, or, it's just really expensive, or, it's because people stole something because they don't have the means to support themselves. And so what the police are, in addition, right, to that violence you're describing, putting hands on people, what they're really good at is getting people into prison, right? And so ultimately when we talk about abolition, we envision a future where needs are met so that violence doesn't happen, whether it's robbery, whether it's, assault or anything like that. But B, when that violence does happen, there are people that genuinely exist to help us, like in a real way, not just to incarcerate somebody, not just to shoot somebody. And so, but I hear what you're saying in that, like right now, what does that look like? It doesn't exist right now, right? And I think that's part of our frustration with the system too. It's gotten so big that there's no room for something else to exist, right? They take up so much money that something else can't exist. But we're working toward building something that's for us.
Hi. I do a lot of community organizing myself. One of the organizations I work with is called Ceasefire. I know they've been in conversation when we're talking about public safety and collaborating with what they call community-based organizations and bringing an approach, like you said, about how we have self-care in the community and have a different approach in terms of what we consider crimes that are not necessarily violent crimes or violations that serve as someone being incarcerated. I know there's plenty of other organizations called like Urban Alchemy. They're one of the organizations. I know they deal with the homeless population. Through their work dealing with the homeless population, they've been able to extend themselves to become like public safety monitors dealing with the homeless population if there's someone that was having a nervous breakdown or somebody that's just homeless. And the 911, we was talking about the alternative 911 call. They've been able to take over that stream of development, of implementation, but they're only operating in West Hollywood, as I know, and I know they just extended a contract towards South LA and the Crenshaw area. And also there's another organization I've ran across called Block by Block, and I'm wondering what is the current.
Yeah, and the only organization I recognize there is Urban Alchemy, so I'm going to talk about them specifically. But when we talk about, entities outside of policing, right? We mean literally not outside of policing, ultimately, right? And so we at the Coalition, one of the things we always talk about is the information sharing environment, all right? Nothing lives in a bubble. if your information at the DMV is accessible by other federal agencies, whether it's ICE, DHS, anybody else, right? Similarly, the information the LAPD gets goes to fusion centers, available to everybody else. That is to say, if someone is working with the police, it's helping the police. Urban Alchemy works with the police, right? In fact, we've seen them facilitate information gathering ahead of the sweep in Echo Park Lake in March of 2021. So when we talk about institutions, or whatever, not institutions, but bodies outside of policing to serve us, that's not what we have in mind. We want to envision something else. But that also gets to what you were saying, where they won't really let anything else exist, right? A body that organizes outside of policing and serves our community usually is targeted by police. That's us. That's what we're doing in this space. So yeah, we haven't seen it yet. I don't think.
So first of all, I'd like to address a question in the chat regarding Peace Camp. Would you recommend Peace Camp to your friends, and why? And I would say I would recommend Peace Camp to someone who's interested in this topic, or in someone who likes outdoors. But it's not for everyone, that's for sure. But I think everyone that came out here definitely had a really good time. And in regards to what we're talking about here, I heard, I think it was in Philadelphia, where whenever there's someone calls the police and reports a crime, and it's not life-threatening, domestic disturbance or something, they'll actually send out social workers instead of police, and the rate of those crimes has gone down 40%. So I don't know about all the numbers there, but I do remember hearing about that, and I think that was a really successful way of kind of easing off of over-policing, because a lot of people think that defunding the police means entirely getting rid of the police, but really the idea is to take 5% of that police budget and hire more social workers to address domestic disturbance calls. So that's kind of what we'd be working towards, I think.
Why don't I go to? Did you have a response?
No, I think I think that's great. I'd love to learn more about it. One thing I could say is in LA we do the opposite. So in the Department of Child and Family Services, if you call a social worker for someone needing help, the police will come along. So in LA we're seeing more and more the police being called in instances where they don't need to be called. In times they even agree they don't need to be called. But even in our alternatives here, this is kind of how deep it is here in LA. I'm reminded of Takar Smith a few months ago, who was having a mental health crisis, and his wife called the LAPD to ask for their SMART team. So they have a mental health response team that's supposed to handle this type of thing without escalating it. And, she explicitly said, don't shoot him. Sure enough, they showed up and they shot him. And so I really want to draw that contrast for folks, but that sounds great, and I'd love to hear more, or learn more about that.
I actually have one more kind of point on all of this to add, which I think, I know I've probably brought this up a couple of times, but I just got back from Cuba, and I was there for May Day, and so I think it's interesting to see how vastly different a country's priorities can be when the system is not a capitalist one, but a socialist one, where the resources are put toward things that actually help people. And in Cuba, despite an all-encompassing economic blockade imposed by the U.S. on Cuba, in spite of that, which is really, really a horrific thing that's been ongoing for like a very long time, since the 60s. I barely saw police. I felt incredibly safe everywhere at all times of day. And when I did see the police in Cuba were there to help people and to make people's lives better. The police in Cuba don't carry guns, and so I think it's, I think it's interesting to try to think through what role capitalism as a system plays in creating these institutions that don't serve the interests of the vast majority of people.
Yeah, that sounds great. I got nothing else.
So thank you all. I just wanted to ask Jackie to also say, just to respond to this question, if you have an answer or if you'd like to. Would you recommend Peace Camp to your friends this year or next year, and why?
I do. Honestly, it's a good experience. I feel like not a lot of people will get to like experience this. And especially because it's like with people that are like of your age and then they're from your school and stuff. And I feel like it was a good experience overall. And I don't know, I just thank the people who let us like stay here because it was a very nice experience. Everything was nice. The pizzas and everything was fun. And then, yeah, just thanks to everyone that put it together. Pat, you guys. You know, it was a good experience. I feel like you guys should most definitely take into consideration if you guys want to come to Peace Camp. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. This is our final podcast for this year for Peace Camp. We hope you've enjoyed listening, and we hope if you're watching this afterwards that you enjoy and come to Peace Camp. We'll see you next time. Chris, do you have any final things to add? No? Okay. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.